I'm Mark, 27, and for almost 3 years, my life revolved around Sarah. We shared a cramped but cozy apartment downtown. I was a software developer, grinding long hours for a startup. The usual story: late nights, relentless pressure, but the pay was good enough to give us a comfortable life. Sarah worked part-time as a teacher's assistant while finishing her degree. Everything seemed stable. We had the occasional argument, sure, but nothing that screamed crisis to me. At least, that's what I thought. Then came that Tuesday. I managed to leave work early. My boss's meeting was canceled, and I decided to surprise Sarah with sushi, her absolute favorite. Maybe we could even catch a late movie. It was one of those rare nights where the stars aligned, and we both had time to decompress. The past few months had been brutal. She was stressing over finals, and I was drowning in code. I just wanted to remind her that we were a team, no matter how tough things got. I parked the car, the takeout bags warm in my hands, and actually felt good for the first time in weeks. But as I walked up the stairs to our apartment, something felt off. The door was slightly ajar. My heart did that familiar stutter skip, then hammered against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I pushed the door open quietly. I heard voices, hers unmistakably, and another one a man's. Initially, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a friend had dropped by? It was odd, but I wasn't ready to jump to conclusions. I moved further in, down the short hallway that led to the living room. And that's when I heard it, the dagger that would pierce my heart. "Yeah, Mark has absolutely no clue," she was saying. Her voice was clear, almost cold, in the otherwise quiet apartment. "He's always working. It's not like he notices when I sneak out to see you. And besides, I have him completely wrapped around my finger. Even if he suspected something, I could talk my way out of it." I froze, disbelief washing over me. Had I misheard? But then the guy laughed, a low, smug chuckle, and the unmistakable sound of glass clinking against glass echoed. They were drinking in our living room. "He's so clueless," she continued, her voice laced with amusement. "It's almost sad how easy it's been. And the best part? He thinks I'm stressed about school, and that's why I'm distant." It's pathetic. My throat tightened. My hands clenched around the takeout bag, my knuckles turning white. My heart pounded so hard I thought they would surely hear it. I wanted to burst in there, confront her, scream until my lungs gave out. But I was paralyzed. I couldn't even breathe. "Well," the guy said, his voice dripping with arrogance, "as long as it works for us, who cares, right? It's not like you're ever going to get caught." That was it. The moment the world tilted on its axis. The floor seemed to vanish from beneath my feet. I didn't recognize the voice. Was it someone for her classes? A colleague? It didn't matter. What mattered was that she was cheating on me, had been cheating on me for God knows how long, and she was laughing about it, treating our life like some twisted joke. I considered barging in, unleashing hell, demanding answers, throwing them both out. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the fact that they were completely oblivious to my presence. Or maybe it was the chilling realization that no amount of screaming, no confrontation, could erase the fact that the person I loved, the person I trusted with my whole heart, was a complete stranger to me. So I left. I turned and quietly backed out of the apartment, closing the door behind me as gently as I could. I couldn't risk them hearing me. I don't know why. I walked back down the stairs, got into my car, and drove. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. My vision blurred. I felt like I was suffocating, but I just kept driving. I didn't go home that night. Hell, I didn't know where home even was anymore. I ended up at Liam's place. A friend Sarah didn't know. I crashed on his couch, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts spiraling into a dark, bottomless abyss. The next morning, I blocked her. Everywhere. Phone, social media, email, you name it. I didn't explain. I wanted her to feel the fraction of the pain I felt at that moment when I heard her voice, laughing about me as if I were some gullible fool. I wanted her to realize I was gone, that she couldn't charm her way out of this, that she couldn't manipulate me anymore. The next few days were chaotic. My phone buzzed incessantly with calls and texts from unknown numbers. She emailed, messaged me through mutual friends, even showed up at my office. Each message started the same. confusion, then apologies, and finally, desperate pleas. Please, let's talk. I can explain everything. It's not what you think. I love you. I didn't respond. How do you respond to someone who can betray you so casually? Then twist the narrative as if you've somehow misunderstood the very clear betrayal you witnessed? I wasn't misunderstanding anything. It was crystal clear. She wasn't just unfaithful physically. She was humiliating me behind my back. She had no respect for me as a person, as her partner. As time passed, the messages through mutual friends intensified. They said Sarah was freaking out, crying, desperate to talk. None of them knew the full story, of course. I hadn't told anyone what I'd heard that night. It was humiliating enough to have happened. I didn't need to broadcast it to the world. Then about a week later, the knife twisted further. I found out who the guy was. Not a classmate, not a random acquaintance. He was Ethan, one of my co-workers. The guy sitting in my living room, laughing about how clueless I was, worked in the same office as me. How had I been so blind? Had I seen him around Sarah before and dismissed it because I trusted her? Now, it all clicked into place. The way she'd casually ask about him, mention him in passing as if he was just a harmless part of my work life. She'd even suggested we invite him out for drinks once. I never thought anything of it. And to add insult to injury, I found out that Ethan had a girlfriend. So, not only was Sarah cheating on me, but this guy was cheating on his girlfriend too. It was like some twisted game, and I was the unsuspecting pawn. I considered confronting him at work, making a scene, but then I realized something. He wasn't worth it. Sarah wasn't worth it. I was done. Dragging it all out into some dramatic showdown wouldn't make me feel better. It wouldn't change what had happened. It wouldn't undo the betrayal. A few days later, Sarah showed up at Liam's apartment. She must have pieced it together through our mutual connections. She pounded on the door, crying, begging me to open up. Liam looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. I told him to let her in. When she walked in, she was a mess. Mascara smeared down her face, eyes red and swollen, hands trembling. I felt nothing, not even a flicker of pity. She started with the standard apologies, promises that it was all a mistake, that she was confused, that the other guy meant nothing, that it was just a moment of weakness. But the more she talked, the more I realized she was still trying to manipulate me, still trying to control the narrative. She didn't even fully admit to the affair at first, instead saying things like, "It wasn't like that, and I never meant to hurt you." Finally, I cut her off. "I heard everything," I said, my voice eerily calm despite the turmoil raging inside me. "I was there that night. You didn't know, but I was there, listening to you laugh about me." Her face drained of color. She stopped talking, and for a moment, I thought she might faint. She knew there was no way out of this. I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. "We're done," I said. "There's nothing left to say." She tried to protest, tried to rush toward me, but Liam stepped between us. She broke down, collapsing in tears in the hallway, begging, sobbing, swearing she'd never do it again, that she loved me. But I was done. I had nothing left to give. I left her crying in that hallway and walked out of her life without looking back. The funny thing is, as devastating as it was in that moment, there was this strange sense of relief washing over me as I walked out that door. Like I'd finally ripped off a massive Band-Aid that had been festering underneath. Sure, there was pain, raw, intense, soul-crushing pain, but the weight of all that deceit, all that humiliation, was gone. I wasn't being played anymore. I was done being the fool. After that day, she stopped trying. The calls, the texts, they all dried up. I think she finally realized there was no getting me back. Maybe she moved on to someone else. Maybe she spiraled into guilt and shame. I don't know. I don't care. What mattered was that I was free from her lies. But Ethan, the guy from work, that was a different story. I thought about quitting my job altogether, but why should I? Why should I uproot my life because of their selfish decisions? I was good at what I did, and I had a future at that company, so I decided to stay. That didn't mean I was going to let him get away with it. The next week, I walked into the office, head held high, acting as if nothing had changed. But it was impossible not to notice the tension. Ethan avoided me like the plague. Whenever we crossed paths in the hallway or in meetings, He'd look anywhere but at me, as if expecting me to explode at any second. I didn't give him the satisfaction. Instead, I went to HR, quietly, calmly, and with every piece of evidence I needed. I made sure they knew what kind of person they had on their payroll. It wasn't just about me. It was about the other people in the office, his girlfriend, who also worked in the building. Turns out, office affairs weren't exactly on the company's list of acceptable behavior, especially when it involved lying and manipulating people you worked with. The fallout was brutal. Ethan's girlfriend found out even before HR had a chance to deal with him. News spreads fast when people whisper behind closed doors. By the end of that week, he was gone, fired, reputation trashed. And me? I kept my head down, focused on my work, and made damn sure no one thought I was the type to be messed with again. I didn't feel like a hero, though. There was no sense of victory in any of this, just a kind of cold satisfaction knowing that I had removed the toxic parts of my life. What surprised me most was how little time it took to move on. I thought I'd be haunted by Sarah's betrayal for months, maybe even years. But after a few weeks, the fog lifted. I didn't feel like the guy who had been cheated on anymore. I felt lighter, like I'd learned something important about myself, about how much I was willing to tolerate from someone who was supposed to love me. I realized that for a long time, I'd been putting Sarah on a pedestal. I thought she was this perfect partner, and I'd ignored all the red flags. The nights she'd come home late with half-baked excuses. The time she'd pull away when I tried to get close. I'd ignored it all because I didn't want to face the truth, that our relationship had been broken for a long time, and I'd been too blind to see it. I won't say I've completely forgiven her, or Ethan. Maybe I never will, but I've learned to let it go, to focus on the things I can control, like my own happiness. And yeah, trust is harder now. It'll probably take a long time before I can fully trust someone again. But that's okay. I'll get there. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that people can be incredibly selfish, but they can also be resilient. I'm not the same person I was before I overheard that conversation. I'm tougher now, smarter, and I know what I'm worth. I won't let anyone treat me like that again. Thanks for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, leave a comment below.